But where do you want to take it from here?
All right. Well, the next place I think I want to take it is, what is going to be the outcome now of Palantir convincing Israel to strike Iran?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now they're already warning about some countermeasures or counterattacks that Iran's going to do, that perhaps they will awaken sleeper cells or something here in the U.S. to perform attacks. And this leads me back to another document here that I just recently covered on the Alchemical Tech Revolution podcast. And this is something called, let me bring it up here. I can't remember the titles. I read so many things on a daily basis. This is the National Blueprint for Biodefense from 2024. It's a bipartisan commission. This was released in April 2024. And this could be the next Event 201 scenario. And in the scenario presented in this is a training scenario, as always with these things, that they decided to use as justification for trying to instantiate new concepts or programs into the works. In this scenario, an attack occurs on July 4th, 2025 in the U.S., where a bioweapon is released by unknown terrorists, and now they have perfect justification. They have their perfect model of their scapegoat. Notice the goat again. In Iran. Now they have somebody to blame for this. In this scenario, they kept it very vague. They didn't know who to blame for this, but they're talking about the unleashing of a bioweapon in various U.S. cities on July the 4th, when there's going to be crowds of people gathered for Independence Day celebrations and things like that. And they're going to release a new virus or pathogen into the mix. Now, I don't know if this is really going to come to fruition, but this is how they have it modeled in the training scenario in this document. You could go look it up. And for context, you could go back and listen to the show I just did, which is called, Is This the Next Event 201? Or something similar like that. I can't remember what I called it. But if you're familiar with Event 201, this was the modeling for the whole outset of COVID on the world. And everything came to fruition in much the same way. So I'm concerned, especially with this kicking off now, perfectly timed, in Iran, that maybe they will go ahead and try to do something with this scenario. So they talk specifically in this event scenario about an attack, a terrorist attack, where they will release a bioweapon in various cities in the U.S., and they actually name the pathogen by name again, like they did with the novel coronavirus. That's what it was in the Event 201 scenario. But this time, it's a virus called Nipah virus that they're going to use, which is far more deadly. And once again, there's some important archetypes at play. Remember, with COVID, they tried to attach it to bats, the symbol of the bat. Remember that? They said corona, it came from the bat. Same thing with Nipah virus. This is another bat virus. Okay, so the archetype is there. In this, we'll have to talk about the archetype of the bat and how it connects in Batman and Gotham. You made the connection earlier without realizing it. Gotham, when I mentioned Gotham, you said it makes you think of Batman. Well, there's a reason for that, and I suspect that may be a connecting of the dots in the synchromystic field here. So we have this bat notion, and this whole bat archetype falls back to a Mesoamerican god called Camazotz. Have you ever heard of this, Richard?
Nope.
Go ahead and type that in the browser and see what you get. Camazotz. C-A-M-A-Z-O-T-Z. And then read for the good people what it tells you.
C-A-M-O-T.
C-A-M-A-Z-O-T-Z. Camazotz.
Got it, I think. Camazotz. Is Camazotz a beast? When Futurama, of course, denies him, I think that's from a computer game, that one. They must have used it, some wiki fandom. So that would mean it's
an archetype that is permeated into the gaming field, then, I guess, to familiarize people with it.
That's as
Yeah.
much as I can find on it at the moment.
Really? Maybe your search returns are different in the UK than mine in ours here.
Camazotz, yeah, Camazotz, the god of. In
There you
Maya
go.
mythology, Camazotz was a bat god. Camazotz means death bat in the Kiich language. The Maya, which is the Mayan culture, considered him a terrifying god who served death and ruled the domain of the twilight. Twilight, again, the shimmering darkness is the twilight, obviously, of the Kabbalah. And a lot of the Sumerian beliefs come from the Mayan culture, if I'm not wrong. So they're
Yeah,
bat.
there's a lot of connection here. Now, here's the other thing. If you look up Chinese bat gods, now bats in Chinese are a harbinger of good fortune. So the whole connection here between the bat, this is all about the alchemical union of East and West. It's to benefit the Eastern powers, the Chinese and the Russians, and all of this. This was the whole archetype once again behind COVID, the unrolling of COVID. It was a positive archetype for those Eastern cultures, but a negative archetype for the Western cultures, thus bringing about death. And if you research Camazotz a little more, you find that he was often associated with disease and illness and death because of illness. So this is the archetype that was empowered there with the symbol of the bat or the bat god. And if you actually do an image search, if you do Camazotz, you'll find a piece of art that was put together by, I don't remember the artist, but he did a sort of rendition of the Batman bust
Yeah,
as
I've seen it.
Camazotz. You
Yeah.
may have seen that in the past. And this is the archetype where Batman comes in, Gotham, the goat herd, tying the goat and the bat together, and all of these different archetypes into one. And it's about unleashing illness and death on Western culture, but in the same token, it will bring good fortune to Eastern culture. And it's kind of an alchemical union of East and West.
We also have the connection between that and the royal bloodlines in terms of the vampire Dracula and turning in morphing into a bat.
Exactly. And this is wherein you get this union of opposites once again, and you have this centralized in the Middle East. See, the union of the West and the East. Well, where does that come together? The Middle East, in Middle Earth. And thus the Eye of Sauron, the all-seeing eye, the Palantir, comes into play with all of that in the Middle East, Middle Earth. So you can see how it all ties these archetypes together on the synchromystic level there as well. But certainly we have our concerns with just the technical nuts and bolts of all of this, because when you realize there are other Palantir programs which are getting tied together in this centralized utility with this war fighting program called Gotham, that's where it becomes a little more concerning. Now, they had another program called Foundry. Do you know what Foundry was from Palantir?
I've heard of that one. That's one I've heard of.
This is all about contact tracing and COVID response and data analytics for COVID response and tracking and monitoring people's responses to COVID. Who's vaccinated, who was complying with mask mandates, who was doing this, who opted out, who was against this. All tracked and detailed. It's all about centralizing your genomic information, your biometric information, your health data together into this composite in this central database for the use of the US government, because they want to make a database. And of course, this ties back to the immigration problem, which was engineered. And we have this immigration and migration problem all across the world. It's not just here in the US. It's amazing how all this happens simultaneously in all these different countries around the world, almost like it's planned that way, right? But so we have a migration problem. So they have the ready-made solution for that, because they've been using Palantir software, again, AI tools for ICE here in the US. That's the immigration arm of the branch of government that will take these illegal migrants or immigrants that came here and export them back to their home countries. And they've been making mass arrests and stuff here using these Palantir tools to find these people where they're at in real time. And it's the same thing going on with this. So all of this is going to be centralized in this one central utility provided by Palantir for the US government. And they're going to go ahead and make a citizens database as well, because they'll use the excuse, well, we have all of these problems with migrants. And now, if you look at the things that just happened here in the Middle East with Israel attacking Iran and the potential for awakening sleeper cells of terrorists that just so happened to come in the open borders over the course of the last 4 years by design, they'll use this as justification for cracking down. Well, we need to get everybody in a database, a central identification database, in order to figure out who belongs here and who doesn't, and get rid of these sleeper cells in the US. So they'll use that as justification for collecting everybody's data, putting it into this utility, and having this one grand unified artificial intelligence selection system to help people, to help the government identify the targets that don't belong here. Or this is the excuse they'll use, but they'll have all your information and they'll be able to individually target you should that come to that, based upon all these things. This is the next step towards a centralized digital control system. And then, of course, at some point, they're going to go ahead and push the digital currency thing along with it. And this is where things become massively concerning for those of us that have been watching from a distance and seeing this stuff all coming to fruition in front of our eyes. They play the long game, and most people can't see 3 steps in front of what it is they're doing now. And this is where artificial intelligence comes in, because it's already 10 steps ahead, at least. Let's put it that way. It knows how to do this, and it's lining up the ducks in a row for this new world order to get what it wants. So now we have this strike on Iran, probably prompted by artificial intelligence, and I'm not the only one saying this now. Prompted by artificial intelligence, which what will that do? That'll cause an incendiary reaction from Iran. Their sleeper cell networks that have infiltrated into this country by design, by open border policies, will activate and can potentially go ahead and do something like this scenario that is given in this national blueprint for biodefense. And that gives them justification for action, for mass action, for instantiating martial law here, for collecting everybody's data, putting it in a central ID utility. So therefore, you don't want to participate? Well, they're coming to get you. And this kind of thing. And it sets up this control grid. You can see the steps of the process aligning. And I find it massively concerning. And that's just the practical nuts and bolts side of this, okay? And we looked at some of the archetypes involved, and they always leverage these energies against people because people are largely unaware they exist. So you see how all these things are aligning in just the right way, and it seems like artificial intelligence is calling the shots on a lot of it, and I suspect it has a lot more influence into world events than what we suspect at the current time.